Today we're talking about actually a very serious and frightening subject, and that is the idea of genetic engineering of humanity. And I've touched a bit on this before, but not really in regard to genetic engineering, more with technological augmentation. But we're going to take a look at the very real possibility of the billionaire rich elite class being able to use genetic engineering to really engineer sort of a new kind of human and split humanity into a master and slave class. It's again, very serious thing, very scary thing to talk about, but it's something that we need to be aware of. It's really important as we move forward. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're actually taking a look at a video here. And now this video is by a YouTube channel called New Thinking Aloud, and I'll bring it up on screen right now. And if anyone wants to check out this YouTube channel and this video that we're going to be taking a look at, you can. It will be, I'll put the link in the description of this video. So what we're going to do, we're just going to jump into this right away, and I'm going to be commenting on it. And it might take a minute to get to the topic, and it might be a little like, where's this going at first? But you'll see very quickly. So let's bring this up.
Welcome, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be with you, Jeff.
We've got a fascinating topic today, Homo superior. It's a topic that you mentioned just in passing on the previous video we did about remote viewing the year 2060. But I can tell you that several people have reached out to me and picked up on that comment and are very, very concerned about it.
I think they should be. We have developed technologies which we have not really fully culturally integrated.
Oh, hey, DB, thank you so much for that super chat. I appreciate it. Nice you could be here. Now, he's talking about how we've developed technologies that we haven't culturally integrated yet. And what he's going to be talking about is genetic engineering and things along that line. But it's also interesting to note that even with things like social media and how much that has impacted us, technology is developing so fast that we really don't know how it's affecting us, what it's doing to the psyche, what different things it can. So it's a good point to just about technology in general. We're developing so fast. Humanity doesn't have the time to integrate it. We're coming up with, such new technologies in such a short amount of time. But he's going to be talking specifically about genetic engineering. And like what I said today, this is a very interesting topic and something that we should talk about because it's very important and it could go in a very scary direction. Because I've talked about this in the form of technological advancements and technological augmentation, where the rich elite could essentially, all these different augmentations for humanity, such as, super strength, super speed, whatever have you, through augmentation of technology. The rich elite, what they can do is be able to afford all of these augmentations while the rest of the people cannot. And you start to have this divergence of a ruling master class and then a slave class, which is extremely scary and something that we want to prevent. But that's sort of the topic today and what we're going to be talking about. But in terms here, this individual is talking about genetic engineering. Now, I want to say right off the bat too, I'm not familiar with this person, so don't assume that I take all his views or whatnot. I really don't know anything about this individual, but this topic is important. Thank you for that, MC Heavyset.
The development of genetic engineering, the Crispr technologies, what's going on? There are several variations of this. One is the reality that, particularly in countries which don't have the same moral objections that might arise here, although I'm not sure what will arise here now.
Yeah, because anything could arise here now. It's getting crazier and crazier with all the restrictions on people's rights, Roe versus Wade being overturned, all this different stuff. It's getting crazy over here. So let's continue and see what's to be said.
This is going to be driven not so much by government, but by the market. When you think about if you could arrange that your child would never get cancer, would never get heart disease, would never get diabetes, wouldn't you do that if you had the money to do it? And of course, the answer is yes, you would do it. And so, as this develops, these technologies develop, I believe that, as I have said, we're going to see the development of a second hominid species, Homo superior.
So this individual is saying that there's literally going to be a new species, and this will be because of genetic engineering. The rich being, that's what it means by it will be driven by the market, and that it will be that money, it's all about money, and the rich will be able to afford this and essentially create for themselves and their family and their future family a new type of human species and this ruling class. So this is something that we absolutely want to keep an eye on, because there's nothing wrong with like having new technologies to, you know, if you could make humans that don't get cancer and have perfect vision or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that inherently. What's very scary about it is when that gets into the wrong hands. It's scary when it gets into in the hands of things like rich elite who don't care about you, things who might have people who might have another agenda, like racists, people who just want power and control over all the rest of the people. So it's something that's going to happen at some point. It's unavoidable, and it could be very helpful to humanity. But this is where we really need to make sure that that it's done in the right way. If it's in the wrong hands, total disaster. Total disaster. We could see widespread slavery, racism, all sorts of horrible things from this. So let's continue.
Because I believe that market forces, particularly amongst the very rich, are going to be so powerful that the ability to order up a child that's as smart as Einstein and as athletic as Michael Jordan and as handsome as, you know, pick whatever your movie star is, it's going to be irresistible. That's one part of it. The other part of it is the development of chimeras. That is the development of, I'm not even quite sure what to describe, species which have had human genes engineered into them. At what point, for instance, would a primate who had been genetically engineered, say a chimpanzee who had been genetically engineered, become a human? Or could you create an army of soldiers who were genetically engineered to be very powerful but not very bright and to follow orders? And I mean,
there's so much danger around this, because, you know, absolutely this would happen, especially in countries with low moral standards. Now, America's low moral standards aren't very high right now, so who knows? You know, nothing's really off the table at this point. But you absolutely know that some governments, if not all, would, if they had that power to, or all major ones at least, to create super soldiers that were extremely strong, but with low intelligence and would follow orders. Very frightening thought, but important to think about.
When you begin to think about this, you really see how dramatically this could alter a human culture, American culture particularly, but also culture around the world. You know, when we look at, for instance, the Chinese one-child policy, that's a kind of exemplar that I would cite. In 1979, the Chinese decided that they would only allow families to have one child. And what happened was not at all what they thought was going to happen. For one thing, the development of sonograms, which made it possible to determine the gender of the child, because Chinese culture is predisposed to support boys over girls, resulted in a abortion of girls and over the selection of boys, to a point where by 2020 there were 40 million Chinese men who probably will never marry, will never have a child, because there aren't enough women. And if we look at that as a kind of precursor of what might happen, what would happen if the very rich, who would be the ones who would get the first access, begin to develop very consciously a Homo superior? That is, their children would not only not ever get any of these terminal diseases, but would also be highly intelligent, athletic, whatever, and that it was gene lining, that is, it would pass on germ lining, that would pass on from generation to generation. Very quickly, within a couple of generations, you would begin to have thousands of people who were superior to the rest of the human race. And what would that be like? And what effect would that have on government? I mean, you can already see in the United States where you've got 4 guys who are running their own space program, and 1 out of 7 children in the United States doesn't have enough to eat, can't get enough food.
That's a great point. Now, I skimmed through this video, but I'm watching it in detail really for the first time with you guys. And the point here is excellent. You have these rich billionaires who are throwing their money away in basically who has the biggest dick or who has the biggest rocket contest. It's not even subtle. These phallic-shaped objects to get to space. Meanwhile, people are dying. Children are dying of hunger. Money like that could be spent to help the human race rather than these ridiculous and childish and useless endeavors. That's why it's very important when we start talking about things like this. And all this that is being talked about with regard to genetic engineering could also be applied to the idea of transhumanism and augmenting humanity through technology. So it could also just be doesn't necessarily have to be through altering DNA, but it could be through human augmentations as well through technology. This is also another way this could pan out. And both will probably be the way it goes. And this is why these things in and of themselves are not bad. Of course, it would be great to be able to make it so no one would get cancer and people would be healthy and everything like that. That's great. But we want to make sure that it's not only affordable to the rich elite. We would want that to be available to everyone. We would want that to be available to benefit everybody, and also to make it make it so that this sort of thing wouldn't be misused as well. This sort of thing can be very helpful, but it's very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. This is one of the most dangerous things that you don't want the wrong person to get a hold of this sort of thing, because really all of this is playing with the future of humanity. Everything we talk about is playing with the future of humanity. But this is where you start to get to a very, very big unbridgeable gap, unbridgeable gap where you start to have, again, a divergence of species into a master class and a slave class. And that is disgusting. And that is abhorrent. And we need to be really, conscious of these things, because technology is evolving so rapidly. It might seem like something that's far into the future, but you never know how quickly something like this could arise.
What happens when market forces, economic forces, alter those kinds of things? I mean, the implications are very dire.
Well, we've always had in our population today of over 7 billion humans on the planet. If you take
almost 8.
If you take the top 1,000th of 1%, you're still talking about a very large number of people who are superior, well, in any category you choose, athletically.
Hey, look, wait, you see, look at that. Just doesn't matter, but I just noticed.
Or intellectually or musically, or you could choose any category. You'll find an elite.
Okay, there are 2,700 billionaires globally.
2,700 billionaires. 2,700 billionaires compared to the 8 billion, near 8 billion population of Earth. So it's a tiny number, but a significant number.
That's what I wanted to make sure that I got correct for you.
All right.
So you got 2,700 people who have enough money to do essentially anything they want. And if those people chose that to have multiple children and all of their children were genetically engineered, what would we really be looking at? I mean, what kind of world would that be? I mean, 2,700 people who had, just say they had 2 children each, and each of those 2 children had 2 children, and each of those children had 2 children. Pretty soon you've got a Homo superior population of several 100,000. What are they going to do? Because conveying protection genetically from diseases or making them highly intelligent does not make them moral. And so you'd have a population of people who, if greed and power were their major motivators, as has been true of most of human history.
Greed, power, motivators for humans for most of human history. This is exactly what we want to change and why we want to bring people to a new consciousness. Because when you get to that point, you really start, here's the thing, when you're in this survival mindset, when you're in the mindset that it's all about me and my survival, my family's survival, my kid's survival over my nation, my God, my country versus your nation, your God, your family, your country. This is when you have a certain class of people dominating another class of people. And it's usually some sort of minority or something like that. But you have a certain class of people dominating and controlling and even possibly enslaving another class of people. The thing is, when you get to a new level of consciousness, like what we want to do in Hyperionism is bring humanity to a new level of consciousness, hyper-awareness. And when you understand that, when you get to that level and you understand that we're all in this together, and that my life and your life is intertwined. We're all in this together. Your well-being and your success is tied up with my well-being and my success, because we're all reflections of an underlying unity. We're all individual nodes of a unified network. So we aren't separate. We are together. And when you realize that, here's the thing. When you're in the individualistic survival mode, all about me, what happens? You have one class of people trying to dominate another one. Someone that, and usually, because, we're stronger than you, we're more powerful than you. What happens when you're in a highly conscious, hyper-aware society? You want to help people. You want to raise them up. If you see someone or a group of people or whatever that are having a difficult time, or they're losing power, or whatever, the goal, the urge is not to dominate. The urge is to help and lift up. You want to help those who are in need. You want to, it's not about overpowering. You see, the mind, everything changes totally. It's just like when humans went from an instinctual existence to self-awareness. Wow, suddenly it was a whole new world. We can build cities, we can have communities. When humanity goes from self-awareness to hyper-awareness, there's not going to be this, desire to dominate and control and manipulate others. It changes into the desire to help others actualize and grow and learn, because you realize that that's what life is all about. It's all about helping each other thrive. So we go from survival to thriving, surviving to thriving. Right now, it's all about survival. We want to move to helping each other grow, learn, and evolve. This is why it's so important to get humanity to that level, so that we can start building a world that's based on helping each other, not dominating each other or enslaving other people, or any of that sick, racism, sexism, homophobia, all the ridiculous and disgusting and abhorrent beliefs and ideologies out there today, all come from and stem from a fractured identity with the self, a fractured identity to others, and a low form of consciousness.
What kind of world would that be? And yet you don't see almost any conversation about this.
Well, it's certainly been explored in science fiction. In fact, the classic case would be the Star Trek movie, The Wrath of Khan.
I've never seen that. Is that any good? I actually haven't seen any Star Trek anything. I've only seen one Star Trek movie, but it was a modern remake, and I heard that it was really bad. So is this a good movie? Should I watch this? Let me know. Tell me in the comments.
Yes, or William Gibson got into this. Yes, exactly. It's been explored a little bit in films and in novels.
Well, let's talk for a moment about, based on what we know of gene splicing technology, how it might work. My understanding is they first have to determine which are the relevant genes, and then somehow they have to program those genes into a virus, and then they have to insert the virus into, let's say, an infant or a young person, so that the virus infects every single cell of the body and implants this new genetic programming into each and every cell.
Well, we know, for instance, that there have already been studies, to give you an example, of research in which they have found that you can control the color of the skin.
Now that's scary. I don't know how true this is. I don't know who I'm not familiar with this person at all. Genetic engineering is not my specialty. All right. So I don't know how true any of this is, but he's basically saying that they're already have, identified this gene or whatnot for controlling skin color. Think about how scary that is. What if some very bad people got a hold of that and wanted only a certain type of people to exist? Very scary shit when and it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but it's important to realize that things like that are very real, and why we want to make sure the wrong people aren't in control when technology like this starts to become more widespread.
Through genetic manipulation. Now, what does that mean? How would that play out? If people are fearful of the other?
Exactly. People are fearful of the other. Yeah, I think you can imagine already the implications there.
And you could create, if you could control, well, in fact, specifically, it's gene SLC24A5. If you could control the color of skin so that children could be made Caucasians, for instance, black children, or white children could be made black children. I mean, the thing that stays with me about all of this, and I first started writing about this in 2006, when I began to read the research literature on what was going on in Crispr. It got me thinking about this because the implications are so profound, and because that you wouldn't have to get that many people. And the other thing that really stood out for me was that a number of years ago, I had dinner with Arthur Kessler, the writer, public intellectual in London, and we got to talking about UFOs, which was something he was interested in.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I skimmed through this a bit. I think he does start talking about UFOs now, and I think he plays with the idea that maybe human genetics were manipulated before. I think I have to see. I didn't watch it in detail, but if that's the case, just know that I don't necessarily agree with everything this person says. So let's just see what he has to say, because now you never know when you get into the territory of UFOs. Sometimes it goes real crazy real fast, but sometimes it doesn't. So let's see. Let's bring aliens into the mix and see what happens there. Why not?
And I said to him, well, what do you think the implications are? And he said, well, I think about 40,000 years ago, maybe it's actually a little longer, but the point is still relevant. He said, I think there was perhaps genetic manipulation which allowed Neanderthal to emerge as Homo sapien. And that, I never forgot that. And he said, they changed the way the high brain, the midbrain, and the reptilian brain operate together.
So did aliens really come down and manipulate human DNA with the Neanderthals and all that? I don't think so. I highly doubt that. Is it possible? Oh yeah, there's so many different things that are possible. I doubt it, but you can't say that for sure that it didn't happen. But the thing, when people ask me questions about stuff like that, what I come back to is it really doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter if humans evolved from aliens manipulating DNA or not. What matters is where we are right now and being able to build a better world right now. So getting wrapped up into all this sort of stuff, if that's something that you're interested in as a hobby or even whatever, I mean, if that's something that you're just interested in personally, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we all have interests, and that's cool. But when it comes to self-actualization and things like that, trying to figure out if aliens manipulated our DNA or if Jesus really existed, stuff like that, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If that's something that you're interested in and you like exploring, that's cool. But people usually come to me and ask that as if it's an important question with regard to what we should do today. But it isn't. Whether any of that happened or not, we are here right now, and we need to focus on ourselves and others and the collective and building a better world.
Some of it worked, some of it didn't. And he said, it really wouldn't take that many people, because if you'd started with just 1,000 people over a period of time, over a century, you'd have a large number of people because of, you'd have multiple generations. So I never forgot that. And then years later, again, over a lunch with John Mack, who was doing all that research about abductees, UFO abductees, and I told him this story about Kessler, who, by the way, Kessler later wrote this up in a book called Janus. And I asked John about it, and he said, well, that's very interesting, because when I look at the abductee data, I am struck by the fact, I hadn't thought about this, but I'm struck by the fact that most or a high number of abductees report being probed genitally. And so is that UFOs trying to genetically alter us in some way?
I just have to say something real quick here. I don't want to get too much into the topic of aliens is a big topic. I did a video on it. I think it's called The Solution to the Fermi Paradox. Check it out if you want to know my full view on aliens, The Solution to the Fermi Paradox. So I don't want to get into it too much now, but I do want to mention that my position is basically that encounters are not what people normally think they are. It's not like little green men running around or anything of that nature. That these other beings are highly evolved entities that exist within the frequency domain. So not even like physical entities in this domain, but mental entities. And I just want to point out that you'll notice very, very large similarities between alien abduction experiences and experiences that people have on some psychedelics like DMT. They're very similar. And a lot of times alien abductions occur when people are sleeping, things like, and things where they would be in that sort of liminal space with regard to the mental domain. So yeah, I don't want to get into my view on aliens. Check out my video, like I said, if you want to know what I think about there. But I don't think of them as little green men running around. At least, not here on Earth. I'm sure there's other species, in other places in the universe. But my position is on these higher mental entities that can interact via the mental domain, and it's interesting to see the similarities in experiences from psychedelics and abductee experiments, abductee, and also near-death experiences as well. There's a lot of similarities between psychedelics, NDEs, and alien abductions. So interesting thing to note, and maybe I'll do a whole video on that at some point, but that's not the topic for today.
Would produce some difference, the emergence of a new species. I mean, I think it's pretty clear the reason we're having such a high increase in UFO encounters, people seeing them and describing them. I mean, it's astonishing the number of reports that are coming out. Is why are they looking at us? And I think the answer is they're behaving like cultural anthropologists. You know, if cultural anthropologists go to some primitive tribe on an island, what do? They set up a camp. They don't intrude on the culture. They try to just observe its operation. They make contact with some small subset, usually a group of people who can inform them, and they get information about the culture to see what's happening. Well, I would say to you that the same thing is going on now. That's why we're seeing so many of these UFO.
I actually have a lot to say about this, but I'm wondering, I don't know if I want to get into it right now, because it would take quite a lot of explanation and a background, some a good familiarity of Hyperionism for it to make sense. But, well, let me see if I can do it in a nutshell. I do believe that higher mental entities are interested in Earth. I don't think that they are like, UFOs in spacecraft and whatnot. But I think it's just like anything in that we are a species that is evolving. Planets are monadic synchronization functions. We're evolving towards a subnetwork mind. We're going to build, if we are successful in Hyperionism, we're going to create a planetary civilization and ultimately achieve planetary independence. So those beings or subnetwork minds that would have already achieved planetary independence may be very interested in watching Earth, because Earth is sort of like, let's say I've talked about this in my other videos, is that planets are like seeds. And what the goal of the planet is to synchronize monadic minds into a collective subnetwork mind that no longer has a need for a planet, achieves planetary independence, and then is a subnetwork mind that can reside in its own collective frequency domain. So when you have a planet that's on the verge of a planetary civilization like this, like us, it's almost like a seed that's about to sprout, or maybe it's almost like a plant that's about to bear fruit or something. So it's very likely that you would have subnetwork minds that are interested in Earth to see, oh, is this going to be successful? Will there be another successful emergence of a subnetwork mind, or will it fail? Will it fail and humanity be fractured and have to start over again? And I think that that's very possible. I think another possible thing as well is that subnetwork minds could be very much interested in, if humanity does fail, to be able to utilize those minds that did come to a higher awareness. So, for example, if a subnetwork mind is interested in Earth, and what we want to happen is for Earth to achieve planetary civilization stage and then planetary independence and form its own subnetwork mind. But let's say that fails. Let's say humanity destroys itself by nuclear warfare, or climate change, or whatever. Pick something. Let's say that happens. Well, I think that we would not have been successful at achieving a subnetwork mind, but there still will be very hyper aware individual minds, individual monads, individual souls. And I think a subnetwork mind would be very interested in seeing if those minds would be compatible with its own subnetwork mind. Because a subnetwork mind is going to be interested in gaining more minds to it. Because the more minds a subnetwork has, the more stable and rich, the more stable and rich it can make its collective frequency domain and its projection. Because the more minds that contribute to it, the more you can do with it, and the more stable it becomes. So I think that subnetwork minds are very possibly interested in Earth for a variety of reasons, to see if it forms a new subnetwork mind. If it forms a new subnetwork mind, what kind of subnetwork mind will it be? Will it be a slave network, or will it be, what we want, which is a synthesized network? Will humanity fail? And if that's the case, are there any minds that did achieve a higher state of awareness that perhaps they did evolve so that they could be compatible with those other subnetworks? I think that, yes, I think it's very possible that they are very interested in Earth. So it's I don't think, this is not about, aliens and flying saucers sticking probes up people's butts or things like that. It's a much more complex. Humanity puts its own low form of consciousness over what's actually happening. In the religious time, humanity always pictured other beings as these angels with wings and very religious figures. Now that we live in a very technological age, they imagine higher beings as almost like scientists, highly technologically advanced beings. They have ray guns and saucers. Well, really, higher beings aren't angels and they aren't aliens as depicted like that. They're these beings that are reside in the mental domain, the subnetwork minds. And yes, I do believe it's very possible they are interested in Earth and the evolution of humanity, because it's like if you plant a seed and it's growing, you want to see, is it going to bloom? Is it going to do it? Is that flower going to emerge? Or is it going to wither and die before it blooms?
Encounters, because no matter where you are, no matter what planet it was on, every species would develop technology would reach a point where the technology was so powerful that it could either destroy the matrix of life of that planet or could foster its well-being. And that is really the critical existential turning point. And we are at that point.
See, that's interesting. So what he's describing is very close to my position, except he's, I think, picturing aliens more like how humans normally picture aliens, as just, I think. I don't know anything about this person. I could be totally wrong. Maybe he has a view more similar to me. I don't know. But what he's saying is that he believes that aliens are basically watching humanity because they are at that point where they'll either destroy themselves or they will move to something better. And that's exactly right, except it's not aliens and flying saucers. It's subnetwork minds that no longer even exist within the physical holos that are interested in the development of humanity to see what's going to happen. Are they going to be able to synchronize and evolve, or are they going to destroy themselves and fracture?
If you look at what's going on with climate change,
and hey, he's right. He's on point here. Okay, so. And I want to point out that this is the Hyperion Project. This is what we're about. We're trying to get humanity to the point where it forms a planetary civilization. Because before we can achieve planetary independence, we have to achieve planetary civilization. Right now, humanity is at the part where they're warring and fighting with each other. We're trying to get humanity to the level of consciousness where we build a global civilization. And instead of putting all our resources and money and effort into competing with other nations and going to war with other nations and all the things that humanity is obsessed with today, putting all our time and resources into building a better world, into making, and that's what a teleocracy is all about, is about creating a better quality of life for the individual and the collective. And then the entire focus changes. It's not about survival anymore. It's about thriving, creating this globally connected network, creating technologies and advancements that help us be able to have meaningful experiences, actualize, grow, learn, evolve. And so the entire focus changes in that state of planetary civilization. And then if that state is successful, because there is a challenge that could face that as well. I don't have time to get into it, but it's called asymptotic burnout. That might not necessarily be that, but that's a potential. Check out my video on the Fermi paradox for that. But if humanity is successful there, then it can finally achieve planetary independence. So right now, we want to get from survival to planetary civilization so that we can focus on our growth, learning, knowledge, understanding, and creating a better life for everyone.
If you look at what's going on with the changes in government, I mean, the United States we have one party that no longer supports democracy and is trying to create an anocracy. What does that represent? I mean, if I were an alien and I were looking at the humans on planet Earth, I would say these people are at the tipping point. They're either going to wake up to the fact that they live in a matrix of life and must foster well-being at every level.
That's teleocracy. That's the exact Hyperion Project. I like I don't know much about this guy, but so far I like what he's saying. So, yeah.
Or they're going to continue on the road they're on now, the plastics, the carbon, all that, and they're going to break down the ecosystems of the Earth and destroy themselves. And it's, it's a kind of flip of a coin as to which is going to happen, and they're watching it.
You can go back historically to it.
I love that. I don't know if his idea of aliens matches what in Hyperionism subnetwork minds, but the general idea of what he's talking about, right on. Very interesting.
Time when I think maybe 40, 50,000 years ago or so, there were two primary species of hominids on this planet. There was the Cro-Magnon, our ancestors, and as you mentioned, Neanderthals. The Neanderthals had larger brains. I gather they left all sorts of artifacts. They seemed to be large, gentle people, and they got wiped out. There are no more Neanderthals today. We are all basically the descendants of the Cro-Magnon ancestors.
I want to mention something real quick before, because I think they're going back to the main topic, which is fine. I just want to say something real quick. There is a way that a planetary civilization can be achieved, but it be a negative thing, and that is in the form of a slave network, which is a forced unity. So there's a difference between a unity where we come together and work towards creating a better world for all of us together under a new consciousness. And that's when we're all trying to help each other actualize and succeed and have better lives and have higher quality of life and have actualization, all reaching the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy all the way to transcendence, so that we have that self-reinforcing feedback loop, ultimately intrinsic to our system. But there could be a forced unity, which is a master-slave framework. So you have this now slave framework, and you can see this. This is what we're talking about here. As a billionaire class arises, that's how a slave framework could arise. A slave framework can arrive in another way. The way slave frameworks arise is when there is a certain class of people that dominate and subjugate another class of people, and then there is a forced unity. And so you now have a forced synchronization as well, because you can create this subnetwork mind that is quote unquote synchronized, but it's in a forced way, in a way where one class is dominating the other class and forcing them to behave and work and do certain things in a certain way. And so I want to make that clear. It's not as though all planetary civilizations are good and all subnetwork minds are great. You can have a planetary civilization formed by a master-slave system, and you can have a slave framework arise, which is a subnetwork mind that is now based on dominance and control and submission, rather than an actual cohesive, unified system working together for the betterment of all. So that's also something very important to keep in mind, and I just wanted to mention that real quick before we continue. Yeah, Protect the Children says conform or be alienated. Right, that would be, essentially so.
No, we also have, because there was interbreeding, we also have, particularly in certain countries, a significant amount of Neanderthal genetic material in our heritage.
We do indeed, especially Europeans. However, pure Neanderthals are gone.
Yes, and the Denisovans are gone. So yes, what happens when another superior species emerges? What happens? That's the issue. I mean, exactly. You've made that's the historical reference point. We need to begin to think about what are technologies? This is really not just about genetic engineering. It's about how our technologies are developing, and are they fostering well-being, or are they creating the tools or the mechanisms by which we destroy ourselves?
And see, I love this as well, where he says fostering well-being, because that's essentially what a teleocracy is. It's about fostering well-being. It's a lot more detailed than that. It's about creating a better quality of life for the individual and the collective. It's about understanding the different levels of happiness, satisfaction, and actualization. But ultimately, that's this. I'm liking a lot of what this individual has to say.
The point is, it's not.
And that's when you make choices in life, in the world, choices when it comes to, creating a society, creating institutions, what laws are in place, etc., how we operate. When the goal in mind in all our choices is to foster well-being, is to create a better life for the individual and the collective, that's when we're creating a better world. Not when it's, what's going to make us the most money, or what's going to make us the most, what's going to increase our the GDP, the gross domestic product, what's going to make us the biggest military power, or whatever. Or if it's just driven by market forces. It's when motivation for everything that we do is driven towards having a better life ourselves, and having a better life for each other. That's when this is today. It's not about that. It's all about money. That's it. It's just about money. Doesn't give a shit about. A good example is look at social networks, social media networks, and things like TikTok or whatnot. I'm not against these things. Social media is extremely important, and it is the foundation of a forming subnetwork mind. We're being connected together through social networks and these devices that are really, these devices are new evolutionary technological organs that give us new abilities, the abilities to be connected to all, see what's going on across the world, see what's going on in your life, and connect to the database of human knowledge. It's very, very important. Social media is very important. But if you look at something like TikTok, what's it's designed to do? It's designed to be addictive. It's not designed to give you a better life. It's designed specifically, all the algorithms are tuned, all the factors are adjusted to keep you addicted so that you'll watch ads or, purchase items from the sponsor or something. It's all for money. So social media is a good example where you see it's all tuned not for your well-being, not to give you a better quality of life, but rather to give you to keep you addicted so that they can make more money. They don't care about you. They just want you alive so that you can be a consumer and a worker or a soldier. That's it. They don't really care about your health. They just want to make sure that you have the ability to consume, work, and fight. Imagine a social network that was tuned to give you a better quality of life. And when I say that, I think some people think of something really boring, like, it's just going to give me philosophy articles every day. No, I'm not talking about that. It's to literally give you a better quality of life. And that also includes entertainment in it. So it would be all these different factors. Whether it's entertainment, whether it's education, whether it's health, monitoring your health, all these different, just imagine, do you see the difference? How look around you, that everything is tuned for just money. What if everything was tuned for giving you a better life and giving us a better life? Universal basic income, universal healthcare, universal housing, universal education, custom education. All these things, we'd have a radically different world.
Not just that we have the Homo superior issue, we also have the chimera issue. We also have other technologies. We are at a place in our historical development as a species where choices that we are making are either going to destroy us or lead us into a whole new direction. a whole different kinds of technologies where you only develop and finance technologies which foster well-being. So this is a much bigger.
See what he's talking about? He's talking about financing and developing technologies that foster well-being. That's awesome. Imagine when we live in a world, and that's the world we want to create, where instead of technologies being funded for war machines and how best we can destroy ourselves, so much of our time and resources is put into developing new ways that we can destroy ourselves. Humanity is a silly species. Imagine all that time and resources that we spend on trying to destroy ourselves, putting towards creating a better life for the individual and the collective. Funding technologies, funding research for the purpose of having meaningful experiences, actualizing, learning, exploring, growing. And people think that this is utopian. It's really not. It's not utopian to think that we can have a world in which we are thriving. And I always say this, but don't believe that it's impossible, because if you believe that it's impossible, then it will be. Because if everyone believes it's impossible, we'll never create that world. But it's very possible. So never let someone make you think it's impossible. It is possible, and we can create it. Not only is it possible, it's not even utopian. It's just square one of a planetary civilization. It's just starting that phase. Look at how long the survival phase was. Getting to that point is just phase one of a planetary civilization. Then we really focus on, we have all these years now, all these generations as a planetary civilization to actually enjoy life and all the phases in that thriving phase, and then eventually get to an entirely new phase of planetary independence where we're exploring our own mental domains as a subnetwork. So there's a lot to look forward to. And what we want to create is not utopian. It's square one of a, grand journey we have. Sorry, I was feeling nauseated this morning, so I had a bread and whatnot before I came on stream to kind of try and settle my stomach, and now it's not happy.
I mean, the Homo superior issue is one piece of it, but it's only one piece because this is something that is going on across a spectrum of technologies. And the real issue with your idea of thinking aloud is, why aren't we thinking aloud about this? Why isn't anybody talking about it? Why don't you see this in the general media? You can see it in the scientific literature and the ethicists that, for instance, in medicine are tearing their hair out because of this issue of how many human genes does it take to produce a human? When does a chimera become a human? You know, we're taking pig hearts to try to do transplants into humans. What happens when you manipulate some animal because you want it to do a certain way? How does that all play out?
And I have to, again, these technologies aren't necessarily a bad thing. They could be an amazing thing. Imagine being able to develop an avatar that can see all the different, frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum, not just the visible light spectrum. And we can do so through technological augmentation, or perhaps gene manipulation, like they're talking about here. It's just when we start getting to that level, we have to be really careful, because I think you can clearly see how very scary it can get if rich elite are in charge, if people who have low moral values and are racist and homophobic or sexist or something like that. We have to be very, very careful when it comes to technologies like this. And it's just like anything else. It's neither good nor bad. It's how it's used. Just like social media and anything. It's neither good nor bad. It's how it's used. It's like a knife. You can use it as a tool to help you, cut some food and eat, or you can use it to stab someone. It's a tool. This is like a knife. It's potentially a very dangerous one.
We're not talking about it. And that is exactly, I think, what needs to happen. We need to be thinking aloud. We need to be having debates about this.
I like that, because the reason why he's saying we need to be thinking aloud, which I love, exploring, new thinking. The channel is called New Thinking Aloud, and that's really cool. I like that a lot. Again, I'm not super familiar with the channel, but so far I'm really liking this.
We need to be thinking about how this is going to impact our political world. We need to begin to think about how this is going to impact us racially, in terms of gender. It really is. We're in a science fiction novel.
Well, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty about it. For example, if we look at the Neanderthals, as you point out, most Westerners, Europeans and Americans, people of European descent, have a certain percentage of Neanderthal genes, which means that at one time, if you define a species by meaning that they cannot interbreed with members outside of their species, it would seem that our Cro-Magnon ancestors and Neanderthals were, in effect, part of the same species.
Okay.
And then, as I understand speciation, if a species population gets isolated for a while, they're no longer able to interbreed like orangutans from different islands. Eventually they can become completely separate species.
Yes. And when you are dealing with species which are capable of producing high technology, where does that get you? You got 2,700 billionaires, all of whom are going to be clamoring immediately to have their children genetically engineered so that they don't get any diseases and they're very smart and all that. I mean, that's inevitable, because what the Chinese experience with one child showed is that this is not ultimately driven, as for instance, the Nazis thought with their fantasy of creating the Aryan man. What actually happens in China and happening in India is that it's driven by the marketplace. That is, those people that can afford to do something that is beneficial will do it if they can get access to it.
So I think it's important to show that he's talking about two very scary ways this could go wrong. And one way it can go wrong if you have someone with a hateful ideology, and he references the Nazis when they tried, their epigenetics and whatnot. But then he's also talking about it being driven by the marketplace, in which it's simply that those who can afford it, like the billionaires, will be able to create this master race of them and their family and their children's children and their children's children's children, and create this divergent race. So you can see that there's multiple ways that this can go wrong. Currently, our problem, it looks like, is that, again, there's 2,700 billionaires. The rich elite are destroying this world, and they want to remain in power. They want their families to remain in power, and they want to stay in power. That's why it's so important that the rich elite be removed from power. We can't have a world where simply people with an absurd amount of money are dictating the way the human race evolves, especially when those with a lot of money usually get a lot of money through psychopathic methods, through bullying, conning, cheating, stealing, and being ruthless. It's usually the most ruthless people. This world is set up so that the most ruthless people are those who succeed, those who destroy other people's businesses and, stomp on the little guy and do underhanded tactics. And we're being driven towards a world where those are, they are the people who are in charge, but they'll even be more so when these technologies develop. And that's why it's so important to know why they are so dangerous and why we must build a world where they are not in power.
And so what happens when you have that kind of development? And again, because of germlining, it passes on from generation to generation. So over a period of a relatively short space of time, you would have radical changes that would occur in human civilizations. we talked before about. I said that on my 2060 project that something happens between 2040 and 2045 that has a huge impact. Now, I'm not sure yet what it is. It might be the end of the internal combustion engine, which is most of Europe and parts of Asia are already committed to. They say we're going to get internal combustion engines off the roadways, and we're going to convert to electric vehicles. So that may be what it is. It could be another pandemic. I don't know yet. Or it could be that this CRISPR technology stuff starts faster than we had realized, particularly in Asia, where they don't have the same, because they're not Christian cultures that have the kind of obsessive concerns that culture has, where people can get access to this. They're going to do it. And what does that mean? What would it mean, for instance, to a country where you could breed a group of soldiers who could see, as for instance, my cat sees infrared light, and you could move in the night in a way that humans cannot presently do it. Just something as simple as that. Now, what would be the effect of having soldiers that could do that as opposed to soldiers who could not? Or suppose you were trying to solve some kind of technical problem and you had a cadre of young Homo superiors and you trained them in the technology and they had IQs of 175 or something like that. What would they develop? And what would happen to the people who didn't have access to that kind of development? I mean, are the countries which are less advanced technologically, are they going to become serfs to the others? Are they going to become the peasants of the Homo superiors? I mean, if you look at human history, we don't have a great track record when you look at what happens when one group of people gets so much power or so much wealth that they just can overpower everybody else. I mean, look at the United States again. We have the largest wealth inequality in the world right now.
That's exactly right. And, I think this is a really good summary of the whole point, where there is this technology that could benefit humanity, but the way the world is set up right now, it could be used in a very deadly way. And when people are in power, they often treat other groups of people very badly. And he said, well, would one group become the peasants of the other? It would most likely be much worse than that. In the long run, it would mostly be a slave society. So this is exactly why we want to be very conscious of what's going on around us, what kind of new technologies are developing, and most importantly, helping raise the consciousness of humanity so we can create a new world where stuff like this is being used to create a better earth for all of us instead of a sick slave society. That's a very real possibility with the way that the world is set up right now. So, I can't stress enough how important it is that we try and get humanity to realize what they are, where they are, and why they are here. Because again, once you reach that level of consciousness, you're no longer interested in dominating others because you realize that there's no point to it because we're all in this together. Now, I'm really curious of what you guys thought. So we only watched about 25 minutes of this, and it's an hour long. So let me know if you guys would like to see the rest of this, or let me know if I don't really usually do commentary on videos. Let me know if you enjoyed this. Let me know if you'd like to see me do more commentaries on videos. Tell me in the comments, and especially tell me in the comments in the replays, because I often look at the comments in the replays to see what people liked. So let me know. Tell me. Yeah, make sure you like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this. There's a lot of videos that I mentioned. You check out my video on the solution to the Fermi paradox, among many other of my videos that touch on this topic as well. And if you enjoy my work, if you feel like you've ever learned something or gotten something from my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, and a lot more. I want to give a big shout out to, let's see, some of our top supporters: Renaissance Theory, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Jordy, Top of the World, Zach, and our newest, Ethan. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to support, the link will pop up right over here. I appreciate it very much. And if you're supporting at the time when my new book comes out, if you are supporting at the time, you will be getting your name in the credits as well. I appreciate it very much.